Welcome to today's session, everyone. I'm actually really excited about today because this is an area that I've become interested in personally over the last 6 to 12 months. We're going to be speaking with Meredith Marin, who is the Executive Director of Vegan Hospitality. And they're a US based non for profit who help the hospitality and tourism industry confidently cater to vegan guests across the globe. So, welcome, Meredith. Thanks for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it personally, and I'm sure our listeners do too.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited to get started.
Yeah, me too. So, just a quick word of warning, we're actually going through a storm where I am. So, if you hear some thunder, I do apologize. But we are going to push on because I'm not only excited to learn more about plant-based food personally, but we work with F&B teams in over 30 countries. And I think the information that you're going to be sharing with them today is going to be incredibly helpful for those teams in how they can better cater to their vegan guests. So let's just jump straight into it. I'm sure people would much rather listen to your insights than hear me ramble on. So probably a good place to start is a bit of background. Can you just share with us a little bit about your journey? What inspired you to co-found Vegan Hospitality?
Absolutely. Well, about 8 years ago, I moved from New York City, which is a very bustling hospitality scene with lots of options, to a small Caribbean island called Aruba. And back in 2016, there were not a lot of vegan options and not a lot of awareness around the vegan and vegetarian dietary requirements in Aruba. Aruba's economy runs on tourism, so they were very interested in getting it right once they heard that there were vegan guests who wanted to be able to dine as well. And so I ended up starting a consulting business to consult for restaurants and hotels to support them in confidently catering to their vegan guests. And over the years, it transformed into a global business. We are also in 30 countries, and we have 150 consultants who are now independently running their own businesses. So we transitioned recently to a nonprofit structure so we can support these consultants and also to support our hotel certification program and make sure we have proper third party unbiased auditing.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So it really was that lived experience over there in Aruba, which led to vegan hospitality, which I mean, I believe that a great place for any business to start. Now, as I mentioned, I'm just at the start of my plant-based dining journey, but in this short time, I've spoken to a bunch of people, asked for recommendations, and I think it's probably fair to say, or certainly what I've seen, is that people have a certain perception of vegan cuisine based on their own experiences, based on what they've read. It might be what others have told them. What experiences in your career have shaped your perspective on plant-based dining in the hospitality industry?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, when I started consulting, I was coming from a customer perspective. So there was a learning curve there. And I started to notice the operational challenges that the businesses were facing when they were trying to cater to their vegan guests. So there were many issues related to having to create custom menu items. So menu customization is something that no chef wants to have to deal with, but it's becoming increasingly more popular. So we needed to figure out how can we set up the menus in a way that allows for customization but doesn't make it difficult for the back of house and the front of house because it affects everyone there. So I think that my perception of plant-based dining in the beginning as a customer was I just need to have a bite to eat. And now as someone more on the operation side of things, it is how can we streamline what's happening here to make things good for everybody and also give our vegan customers the same standard of quality experience that our traditional customers come to expect, because our vegan customers were once our traditional customers. As you said, you're at the beginning of your journey. Most people weren't born vegan these days. Most consumers weren't born vegan. So they know what it's like to have a traditional customer experience, whether that's at a restaurant or hotel. And they're really looking for that same kind of experience once they go vegan. And I believe that chefs want to do the right thing. They want to serve all of their guests for the most part, but it can be challenging when they lack the tools to do so and they feel like the vegan options they're putting out just don't reflect their best work. So they would rather not do it because they don't want people to think that that's the standard that they are able to put out there into the world. So that's why I started supporting chefs. And part of my background also that influenced me is my social work and psychology background. So before I transitioned into hospitality, I was a therapist, social worker, community organizer in the field of public health. And it's really important to me that when I come into this work, we're partnering together. So a lot of mindfulness and compassion goes into the work and understanding the difficulties that chefs face, the challenges that these restaurateurs face, and wanting to make sure they maintain profitability while they are trying to cater to this niche group and navigate this transition overall for the hospitality industry becoming more plant forward.
Wow. Firstly, incredible CV. Kudos to you. I had no idea. Secondly, I think one of the final points you made there is actually a really pertinent one. I mean, chefs, like everyone that I meet or anywhere, they tend to like to stick in their comfort zones to a certain degree. But everything you read, and you touched on it as well, everything you hear is pointing to an increased demand for these vegan options. So I guess how have you seen the demand for vegan and vegetarian options evolve in the recent years within, hotels, within restaurants?
Yeah, I think chefs also crave creativity, and that's probably the reason they got into it in the first place. And vegan and vegetarian options gives that chance for creativity. However, much of the restaurant infrastructure isn't set up to foster that kind of time, that kind of environment. Chefs are usually busy training their staff and not so much focusing on developing new vegan dishes. So the demand has evolved over the years and it's going to continue to evolve. So probably the biggest trend is flexitarianism. So it's not just vegans that are ordering these dishes, but the person just maybe like you, right? The general public has become a lot more interested in seeing plants as the centerpiece on the plate. And it's become almost a novelty for people to see a mushroom steak or a cauliflower wings. These are things that the mainstream guest will order because it's exciting and different, and people want to have those different experiences. Another difference between then and now is that vegetarian options used to be the avant-garde, trendy option where, if you had a vegetarian label, you were ahead of your times. Now, when I see restaurants with vegetarian labels, I see those are the ones falling behind. So we're seeing a lot of vegetarian dishes and labels become eliminated or just mainstreamed. So that traditional Caesar salad that a lot of people used to label as vegetarian, well, most of it wasn't vegetarian to begin with. There's anchovies in the dressing, and the Parmesan isn't vegetarian because it's made with cow rennet. So I think, we're getting to be a more of a recognition of what these labels mean, that actually they need to be focused on allergens so that people understand what's in the food, since we have this increase of allergies, which is influencing the demand. And we're just seeing a lot more vegan labels because the vegan cuisine is the most inclusive cuisine. Most people can eat fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains and seeds and beans, but not everyone can have milk and dairy, which is one of the top allergens, especially for children. Eggs is also a top allergen. So if we're going to focus our plant-based, options on those kind of ingredients and have them be dairy heavy, then we're isolating a lot of our potential market. One other thing to mention here with the demand is that when we're thinking about our sales of our plant-based items, we need to also recognize this phenomenon called the veto vote, which is the concept that the vegan in the group is the one that often chooses where the entire group eats. So if there's one vegan person in a family or in a group of friends who are going out, that person needs to find something to eat, right? So that group is often
Sure.
going to look to them and say, it's your choice. You figure out where can we go eat where everyone can be happy. And that's why when you have a quality vegan program, so you have some appetizers, entrees, and desserts for vegan guests, you're attracting not just that one person, but an entire group. So when you look at your sales and you see, okay, we sold 10 vegan items today, we want to take a look at who else was at that table, because it might have been that you attracted 80 guests through those 10 vegan items. And it wasn't just looking at that sales report and seeing those 10 items. We can really expand the way we think about using the vegan items as a marketing strategy overall.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Can definitely appreciate the allergens with kids. Two of my three children have a dairy or had a dairy intolerance, which we had to work our way through. So I've lived that experience as well. And it does seem like there has been a significant evolution in people's behavior with respect to vegan dining over the last few years. So, yeah, maybe that's something we can explore in a little more depth. So, 5 years ago, the world experienced COVID, which created this transformation or digital transformation within hospitality, within restaurants, because operators were looking to adopt, I guess, technology that was contactless, because that's how they were keeping people safe, or there was that perception anyway. I mean, we certainly saw a huge increase in demand for our digital ordering platform, and that continues today. In your opinion, has the rise of these digital menus, these mobile ordering platforms, changed the landscape for plant-based dining?
Absolutely. I think there's an opportunity, but there's also caution that we have to make sure we're transitioning our menus properly to make sure that we're still providing the correct information to people. So I think it might make sense to pause for 1 second and just give a definition of veganism and vegan dishes so that
Sure.
we understand when we're talking about using those labels what we're talking about. So the vegan label, if you're putting a vegan label on a dish, it means that there were no animal products used at all in the creation of that dish. So no body parts of animals and nothing that comes from the animal. And then we're also talking about the way that that dish was processed. So if you're using sugar, for example, in the United States, many sugars are not vegan because they're processed with bone char. If you're labeling your wine menu, which is something I often do for hotels, we want to make sure that the wine wasn't processed using gelatin or isinglass, which is a fish bladder, for example, or egg whites. So we want to make sure we're labeling those items correctly. And that's one of the major challenges when we're talking about transitioning to a digital menu is making sure that we can label items properly. Often restaurants will rely on their servers or their management to communicate this kind of information, whether it's a vegan guest or a guest with allergies. And when you're ordering online, you don't have that luxury of being able to rely on those individuals who have that knowledge. So we have to have our menu be the main communication strategy for our customer relations. And through that, we need to make sure we don't make any mistakes because once you make one labeling mistake, you're then losing the trust of the customer, especially the customer with allergies. So we have to make sure we are triple checking those labels. And anytime an update goes into the system, that we are also checking that again to make sure that it didn't, realign or readjust anything that we were doing. And if we're not doing labels, so if you're not at the stage yet where you've labeled for the vegan options, for the gluten-free options, you might be losing orders. I've heard stories from customers and I've experienced myself where I'm trying to order something online and it's really unclear about whether this restaurant understands vegan options and they haven't labeled things. And I may not always feel like I have the time or want to pick up the phone and try to get someone on the phone who understands what I'm talking about and clarify their digital menu. The ease of the digital menu is the point. So we want to make it as easy as possible for customers. Another thing you can do if you have that capability is to have a filtering option. So you can have a customer click on the word vegan and all the vegan options come up. So you're essentially creating a vegan menu within your traditional menu, which makes it easier for customers to not have to scroll endlessly and also eliminates some trigger points because when a vegan guest who is vegan for the animals for ethical reasons, they see veal and foie gras on your menu, they lose their appetite. They're really not interested in seeing the animal cruelty involved in the menu. So if you can create that filter experience, then they're going to have a much more exciting experience with your menu and they're going to want to place more orders. Another thing that you want to consider with digital menus is making the process as quickly and easily as possible for them because they tend to abandon orders. So you might already see abandoned orders in carts, in your backend data. And this can happen in the user experience for the vegan guest if things are unclear or tricky. So make sure that there are options to add on. So add on tofu. Don't make the customer type it into the notes, I want tofu instead of chicken. Just offer that as an optional add-on. Make sure it's clear that the tofu is fried in its own oil. So the tofu is not fried in the same frying oil as the chicken, for example, if you want to label it vegan. And another thing I recommend is just to take a look at what are the trends with online ordering. If you go to Grubhub, they release data every year. And I remember it was right during COVID in 2021. That was the year the Impossible Cheeseburger was #1 order on Grubhub overall. It replaced that spicy chicken sandwich. So we still see plant-based items leading, and it's really clear to optimize your digital menu so that you can have a chance to see your plant-based items thrive.
Okay. Oh, funny you should mention Impossible Burgers. I was at a trade show a number of years ago, and they were right at the start of their journey. And we had the opportunity to go up to their stall and try a lot of their, and it was incredible. It was unbelievable how similar the taste was, if that's what they were going for. You really couldn't tell the difference between the plant-based burger and the meat-based burger. So that certainly surprised me. But if I'm hearing your messages there, in terms of building out these digital menus, be clear. Number one, be empathetic. Number two, and make it seamless because it is very easy to abandon an order in an online shopping cart as opposed to walking out of a restaurant once you've actually made the decision to go in there and dine. So guests, as soon as they have a barrier or a perceived barrier in front of them, they will abandon that cart. So there's some really great messaging in there for all our clients and all our listers out there. And just if we stick with digital ordering for the moment, you've mentioned a few things about being clear in the labeling and whatnot. Is there anything else that you can do with digital menus to enhance the experience for guests and diners? So people constructing these menus, what can they do practically apart from, I guess, you've mentioned the labeling a little bit, you mentioned the filters. Is there anything else from an advice perspective that you may have?
Sure. Well, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that your traditional menu, the one that's listed on your website and handed to customers, actually matches the digital menu, because that's another point of confusion for customers. If they see different things on different menus with different labels, they're not going to trust it anymore. And as you're going through your menu and updating it, you can start optimizing your plant-based items for success and profitability. So one key tip would be to not use the word vegan as the title or the name of a dish. So instead of vegan burger, we can say Chipotle black bean burger. So we want to describe the flavors, we want to describe the ingredients and the name of the dish. The vegan information, that's an add-on, that's a label. It's not something that's going to describe the dish. So we want to really be clear and enticing with our dish names to get more people to order them. So go through your menus, start optimizing your paper menu before you go ahead and transition to digital. And then make sure you have a clear key. So if you are using labels or using a vegan label, gluten-free label, or anything else, make sure there is a key somewhere. So make sure if you're doing a digital menu, sometimes we forget or we can't find the function to add a key. So making sure you have a menu key that states this label equals this terminology, and make sure that people can find it and see it easily. And I think I shared this before, add-ons are a great opportunity to upsell plant-based items, and they allow for much more clear communication. So if you have a curry, for example, a vegetable curry bowl, and you normally label it a chicken curry, change it. Just make it the green curry and then let people choose their protein option. They can choose tofu, black beans, chickpeas, chicken, whatever it is that they're choosing, but it makes it a much more clear option for people, and making more of the bases of your meals plant-based, fully plant-based, is going to save you a lot of time in swaps and recustomizing dishes in the kitchen. Another thing I recommend is to avoid charging a lot more for the vegan items, especially when you're actually saving money on those vegan items. So if you're doing it
Right.
right, most of the vegan items are going to actually have a higher profit margin. So tofu is going to be cheaper than steak, and black beans is going to be cheaper than chicken. So if you're creating these vegan options, you're most likely going to have higher profit margins. And when people see that there is an upcharge for vegan dishes, then they start to feel taken advantage of, and they're not going to leave a great tip. They're going to feel like you're nickel and diming them for just being vegan. We don't want to feel punished as a vegan guest. So especially when you're looking at upcharges for drinks, you're charging an extra $1.50 for oat milk. Think about it. Are most of your orders coming for oat milk anyway? Oat milk is one of the top milk choices now, and it doesn't feel good for a customer to feel like they have to pay an extra $1.50 for oat milk, knowing that when they're buying that in the supermarket, it's not $1.50 extra per portion, right? So I understand in the beginning we had to do this because there was food waste. You weren't sure the demand, but now that we are pretty clear that there is a demand for these vegan milks, we need to start creating price parity with these dishes. Same with the proteins, right? With our vegan burgers. So we want to make sure that we're not penalizing people for being vegan. And we also want to encourage people to make that choice and not be priced out of it. So you'll have to cost balance a little bit, looking at the rest of your menu, and change around some of the profit margins in your other dishes to make sure that you can have price parity if that's an issue for you. Another thing that I recommend is running some promos. So it's great to promote your vegan dishes, because one of the biggest barriers to people tasting plant-based items is that they're just scared of change. They're scared of trying something new, and that's a natural human function. People are scared. It doesn't mean they're not going to like the dish, but it means they just aren't sure if they're going to like it. And to spend $25 on an entree and you're not sure if you're going to like it, that's a risk. So we can take away that risk for people by running a special discount. On Mondays from 5 to 6 p.m., we have a special promotion on our new vegan option. You can give it a try, right? There's all sorts of promos you can do. You can also make sure that many of your appetizers are vegan friendly, because that's a lower price. It's a lower risk for people to try it. And don't forget about desserts. So that's another opportunity to upsell. If you have a vegan customer, you've caught them, they're ordering from your app, why shouldn't they have a dessert option too? Drinks as well. So make sure that you
Absolutely.
are being clear and giving people an option to order as much as possible.
So inclusiveness, big point there. Don't make people feel isolated in their choices. And obviously, you touched a lot of labeling there as well. It sounds like, with respect to the icons, the labels, the keys, if that information is not there, you are just simply going to be losing orders at the end of the day. obviously that education component at the same time, bringing people into the vegan dining experience rather than separating it out into these two different experiences, I think is a fantastic idea.
I'll share just for people that have better graphic capabilities, people who have visual people on their team, you can do even more with this. There's just such an opportunity with digital menus to showcase really what the food looks like. So don't forget about taking photos of your food and showcasing that. You can even have videos of people tasting the food and really focus on the flavor and the textures of the food. This is very important. Often we leave the conversation around health, sustainability, and yeah, that's really important for why people are plant-based, but people are choosing what they want to eat because they want it to taste good. So we want to focus on that. And you can share the story behind your dishes. So if you've created a plant-based dish for a personal reason, or you were traveling and you tried this amazing pizza in Italy that was vegan and you brought it back to your restaurant, these are really great stories to tell and will also help upsell your dishes. And when you are utilizing a digital app, you can potentially also track the sales data. So you want to track how it's doing. And before you simply remove a vegan dish for underperforming, especially if you've only given it a short amount of time, try to see if you can improve that dish first. So look, is it nutritionally balanced? Are there fats and carbs and proteins in this dish? Is it a satisfying dish? Are there delicious flavors that actually mirror what is on our traditional menu for our traditional guests? And are the vegan guests having that same experience? So also, we want to see, is it on brand? We don't want to see pasta at a sushi restaurant. So sometimes we see vegan
Mhm.
recipes that are, oh, well, I don't know how to make vegan recipes in my style of cooking, so I've done a different style, right? We see that curry, Indian curry everywhere, but it actually only is appropriate really on the Indian menu. So really look at your dishes before you remove them or hire a consultant, get some support to make sure that you're creating dishes that are going to sell. And if you can also survey the past customers. You can have pop-ups on the digital app that say 15% off your next order if you take this survey and find out what people liked and what pushed them to order the vegan options.
Yeah, no, I was just about to touch on that as well. So obviously you've got your digital menus, but there are other digital tools that can gather feedback. So you're basing your decisions on the data that your guests are actually giving you. So there's a lot of really helpful information there. I'm sure our audience is going to take a lot away from that. Maybe this is a good time to slightly change tack. So we've been talking a fair bit about the customer, and the focus has been on the customer today. And that's what hospitality is about, really. What about if we start thinking about the challenges that the restaurants face when they're catering to vegan and vegetarian guests? Because you mentioned chefs towards the start of our chat, but what other challenges do these restaurants face when they're actually implementing a vegan cuisine or a vegan based menu?
Yeah. So what we can do is we can start to look at all the different customer touch points and who's involved from the restaurant operation side of things and how it's affecting them. So when a customer is first learning about a restaurant, they're usually checking the website. And so the marketing team or the graphic design team or the web developer, they're the first person that's going to run into these potential issues with communicating the
Right.
message to the customer. So they need to think about, how can I communicate to vegan guests without isolating our traditional guests and really communicate this message of inclusivity and be clear that everyone is invited and that we're going to cater to everyone. And also that we have to stay true to our restaurant's theme. We're not going to customize every single dish. So we have to make sure our menu is adaptable to meet the dietary needs, but also stay true to why we have a restaurant in the first place. So that's just touch point number one. And then when the customer actually calls the restaurant to make the reservation, we've got another touch point with the host or person answering the phone needs to understand what vegan means and needs to be able to communicate about the menu, because vegan customers want to know they can be served before they make that reservation. Finally, when they walk in and they sit down at the table, all sorts of things happen for the customer that different people are involved in. So someone might come over and bring a bread basket to the table, and that bread basket is going to cause a question from that vegan guest. The vegan guest is going to say, is the bread vegan? And oftentimes the answer is unknown. The person delivering the bread basket has no idea. So then we have to go get the manager, which is an interruption in the service. So the manager needs to come over, and sometimes the manager isn't sure if the bread is vegan and they have to go check with the chef. And this little dance that we see a lot with between servers and managers and chefs, it's loss of money because it's time. Time is money. You can serve more people if you're answering fewer questions. So we want to make sure we have the correct answers. We can train the team in advance and make sure we know every touch point, walk through it for your own restaurant. What are the touch points and what kind of questions might we get? Is the bread vegan? Okay, great, it is. Now, what about the butter? Do we need to take away the butter and put some olive oil instead? Whenever you're
Sure.
taking away something from a customer, it's a negative. Think of it as like a video game where you're losing a point. So you never want to have to take
Yep.
something away. You want to always be adding value to your customer. So better to veganize all your bread baskets and then ask people, would you like butter or would you like olive oil with it? Or you could have a vegan butter, for example, or opt for an olive tapenade so everyone can enjoy. So these are ways that you
Sure.
can streamline things without having so many questions. The next touch point would be the menu. So is the menu clear or are there mislabels or there lack of labels? Because you're creating a lot of issues for your server to have to communicate accurately every single time if you don't have a clear menu that's communicating to your customer as a standalone way of communication. The server might need to go back and forth to the chef to get accurate information. The customer, especially if they have allergies, might not trust that information and be confused. And sometimes, even if everyone does their best to place the right order, the food still comes out contaminated. It might come out with cheese on it when you've ordered it without the cheese.
Yeah.
Those challenges, and it frustrates everyone. So it is not just the customer that's frustrated. It's very hard for the restaurant. And oftentimes when I meet a chef for the first time and they find out I'm there to help them, I'm vegan, I'm the consultant, they're like, oh, I hate vegan guests. I don't want more vegan guests coming to my restaurant. And as we talk about it, we realize they don't actually hate vegan guests. They just hate the way that they have to serve them because their systems are not in place to do it successfully. And so there's a lot of negativity around the vegan customer, and they're known as this difficult customer because currently the way operations are makes it difficult to serve them. So we need to streamline as much as possible. We want to look in back of house and make sure that we have clean spaces. So if we're grilling the tofu, it's not grilled on the burger grill. If we're frying French fries, we don't want to take vegan French fries and all of a sudden make them not vegan by frying them in the fish oil. It's also an allergen
Sure.
contamination. So these are just some of the issues that I see restaurants face. And generally, it's just an overwhelming process for them. And again, makes them usually feel like, why do we have to go through all this trouble for such a niche market? Maybe it's just a trend. Maybe it'll go away. Maybe we can kind of stop, just ignore it and ride the wave with
Yeah.
all these other trends. But fortunately or unfortunately, veganism isn't a trend. It's actually quite a large movement in the right direction for the industry. And that's largely due to climate change and sustainability purposes. We do need the industry to transition to more sustainable practices. And the industry is on board with that overall. So we have restaurant associations, hotel associations trying to become more plant forward for sustainability reasons. And so we do have
Yep.
to make these changes, and we want it to be as simple as possible for the restaurant teams.
Okay. So it sounds like for both the benefit of the customer and the benefit of the venue, it's best to have the vegan experience, the orders, as a part of the SOPs rather than an exception to the rule, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay. And you just touched on trends there. What future trends do you foresee in plant-based dining, apart from it becoming more common, apart from it becoming a more standardized part of the restaurants, the hospitality industries in general?
Yeah, we see trends right now of some of the more traditional dishes being completely replaced by the plant-based versions. So this is also something that I work on with my clients. We work to transition some of their best-selling appetizers into a vegan version. So for example, if you have a spinach artichoke dip on your menu, you might want to try converting that to a vegan recipe. Most people won't even notice the difference. It'll taste great, but it'll help with reducing your food-related emissions, and it'll give you an option for those vegan guests. Even meatballs I'm seeing being transitioned to those Impossible meatballs, and everyone loves it. When you do
So
these
good.
trainings in the kitchen with the chefs, they're like, "This isn't meat, this is great." So it doesn't change the experience of the guest, it just enhances it and opens it up to more customers. Like I said, starting with the appetizers makes it easy because you're going to have crowd pleasers, but you're not gonna take away people's meat in their entrees, which is what's really important for the traditional customer right now. If you want to go further, then I tell people to focus on the 6 S's:
Yep.
salads,
Yep.
soups, sides, starters, sweets, and sauces. Okay, so these
Okay.
are things that we can start transitioning our menu toward more plant-based. We don't start with the main dishes. We're not going to just have tofu for every dish and beans. People are going to stop coming because we can't have that change so fast. So what we need to
Yep.
do is start phasing it in. So we want to phase in the plant-based ingredients and phase out the animal products seemingly without people noticing even. So if you're phasing out animal products in a sauce, most people aren't going to know. If you're changing that chicken broth to a vegetable broth, most people aren't going to notice. So you're doing things behind the scenes that are helping make your operations easier, removing some common allergens and reducing your food-related emissions. And you're transitioning your menu to plant-based, but in a subtle, gradual way. So salads, for example, are something we hear all the time. Oh, vegans, you just eat salads. It is very hard to find a vegan salad on a menu. And if you look at your own restaurant menu, take a look. How many of your salads are vegan? Do you have cheese on them, eggs, bacon? Is your salad dressing made out of dairy? So it's actually really hard to find a vegan salad. And the best thing you can do is make all your salads vegan and keep those other options as add-ons. Add on the cheese, add on a dairy dressing, add on a bacon. So we don't need those built into the actual greens of the dish. Same with soups. You can have your soup of the day always be vegan. That's a great option for people, and most people will not complain about a soup of the day being a vegetable soup. There's so many great ideas that side dishes should be vegan. There's no reason to have broccoli with butter these days. You can use oils, you can steam it. There's so many different ways to make vegetables taste delicious without using butter. So there's no reason to have your sides be not vegan friendly. And you should label your sides too, so people don't have to ask. And again, sweets, we don't want to forget about desserts. It's very easy to make vegan desserts now. And of course, you can hire someone to support you with that. But most people won't know the difference. I just replaced a brownie on a menu with a vegan, gluten-free version and vegan ice cream. No one's complaining. It's one of their best sellers. So we want to start thinking outside the box. If you tried vegan food 10 years ago, a lot has changed. So it's time to start going out and tasting, going to those trade shows and seeing what's available in your community.
Awesome. Awesome. I guess like everything, it's when something begins, it moves very, very quickly. And what your initial experience is compared to what your experience could be now. I've had some incredible vegan dishes with cauliflower, especially with using African flavors. I've had one of the best meals I've ever had. The focus of the meal was a half cauliflower piece. So yeah, incredible information. One last question before you go, if I could, because I know that our clients are going to want to know this. How can industry professionals collaborate with experts like yourself to create a more inclusive, appealing, plant-based dining experience?
Yeah, you can just reach out. I'm on LinkedIn at Meredith Marin. You can go to veganhospitality.com and see what we offer. So we are a global nonprofit network and we partner with hospitality groups. We partner with individuals. So we're really happy to help and assess what's happening for you and where your needs are. We offer a whole process starting with a menu evaluation through a menu launch, but we also can really meet you where you are. So if you want us to just simply look over your menu and give you some quick feedback, it's also available to you. So my recommendation would be to just go to our website and fill out our contact form where you can let us know what your needs are and I'll reach out. And then if you're in a region different from mine, then I will pair you with a consultant in your region.
Fantastic. Meredith, thank you so much. Really interesting, really helpful information. As I said, I'm a convert. I've got my vegan-based dessert from a company called Health Lab, which I'm going to have a crack at. And I think it's going to be delicious. So let's finish up here. And thank you again from me personally. Thank you again from all our listeners who are going to get a lot from today's session. And I look forward to seeing how the vegan or plant-based food industry develops and how your journey continues.
Thank you for your time and great questions.
My pleasure. Always happy to help.